from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today, it's my pleasure to welcome to our program the President of North Idaho College, and we shall entitle today's program a report from the President of our institution. We're going to talk about a number of higher education issues that affect all of our people that are involved in any way in higher education, are also impacted, if they're not, by the programs. Our guest is Dr. C. Robert Bennett. He has been with us at North Idaho College now almost 9 years, I believe, close to it. And he is also involved in a number of national and regional and local organizations that involve higher education. Dr. Bennett, we've had you here on the program before, and we're delighted to have you back and to talk about something that's very important to all of us in the United States and around the world.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Tony.
And as always, I'm so pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all is Janelle Burke, an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Sheen, the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and we shall ask Janelle to commence today's questioning of our guest, Dr. Bennett.
Dr. Bennett, it's just a pleasure to talk with you. You've been recently at an American Community Colleges conference of some type. Mm-hmm. Can you share with us what it was you were doing there? And then can you tell us about some of the highlights? I understand that one of the bright new topics was a lot about telemedia and about high tech and what the future was going to be for those things.
I'd be happy to. It's the American Community College Trustees National Meeting, and one of the things that's so unusual about community colleges is that the trustees of each of those colleges are invited to go to regional and national meetings. This year it was in Seattle, and all of our trustees had the opportunity to go, and the thrust this year, the theme was how high tech is going to impact the future of education, particularly higher education. So most of the talks focused on that topic. And the thing that I think impressed all of the trustees, and naturally that's going to be felt by the administrators when those trustees go back then in their board meetings and say, what are we doing, is how is high tech going to impact teaching and learning. The thrust, I think, was to say that it is going to impact it, and probably in a positive way. I'm sure they're saying it will enhance the way teachers present their lessons, and it will probably allow people to be reached that could ordinarily not come to the campus. That's all part of it. But one of the most interesting pieces of high tech is that people are now finding that it's very profitable to make these programs that can be delivered, can be put together at one place and then delivered throughout the country via the satellite. And so I think what's going to happen is that people in the business of education are going to be faced with some pretty serious competition from some high-powered people, such as the Stanfords, as you said before, we were talking earlier, the Harvards. They're going to get into that business, and I think there'll probably be some interesting cooperative agreements being made between community colleges and other higher ed institutions as to how education is delivered in the future.
Steve Sheen.
Dr. Bennett, do you see some dangers in the high-tech classroom of the future? Is there something that students get from a traditional college education that is going to be lost, that's truly valuable in what we think might be the future classroom?
Well, I'm old enough to realize that I think some of the most exciting experiences I ever had in college were those in which I had a very good teacher, and there was a lot of give and take in the classroom, a lot of discussion. I would hope that kind of feeling would never be compromised, and I think it might be, in a situation where you can always do things with TV, there's a little more of a sterile environment. However, technology is improving to the place. In fact, we have it on this campus where we can put students in 2 or 3 locations. They can communicate via television with each other and with the teacher. So as the demand gets greater, the sophistication of the equipment is improving. So I think they may even be able to capture that. But there's another piece to it, and that is knowing the professor and knowing that you can go over and maybe have a cup of coffee or a Coke. That all was part of my experience, and I felt it was a very important part. I'm not sure that can be preserved in the way we remember it with high tech, but they're certainly working very hard to make it customer driven.
And that may be the bigger part of the question. I suspect there's always going to be students who will prefer the traditional college education if they can afford it. But is education in general beginning to listen more to the needs of the customer, the student, the client, in pioneering new delivery systems?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I just was in Twin Falls last week, and we were giving a report, or we were listening to a report being given called the NCHEMS report. It's the National, let's see if I've got it here, the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems. And this report was commissioned by the State Board of Education. There were two pieces that came back out of this report. One of them centered on community colleges and the role of the community college, not only with the two that we have that are separate community colleges, but also the role of the community college in other institutions, four-year institutions. And the point that they were making in this report is that education must be consumer-driven. Now, that's interesting. You think, well, maybe it always has been, but they're saying that's not the case. They're saying that normally what has happened is that the people on the campus have decided what's going to be offered, which is provider-driven. Now, the only point I want to make is that the State Board was buying this NCHEMS report almost unanimously. They were believing that education is fundamentally, educators have fundamentally got to change their concepts so that they look to see what the customer wants and then change the institution. I think there's some basis for some heavy philosophical discussions with respect to how that will be done, but I think there are some fundamental changes going on in terms of what education should be in the future.
Dr. Bennett, recently you have been attending a number of meetings in which there's been a discussion.
Seems like all I ever do is go to meetings.
Well, a lot of those are very important, but you've been attending meetings where there's a discussion about the national policies and how those two may be changing that affect K through 12 and higher education. And also recently you were privileged to be in Twin Falls when former President Gerald Ford was there at the College of Southern Idaho. Can you share with our viewers, not only in this state but across the Northwest, what you see as some of the trends from some of those discussions at those meetings?
Yeah, you're right. I have been to a lot of meetings, but in fact I think the meetings help with the perspective in terms of education. I had a chance to be in Boston last week, and I heard two people, Robert Novak and Jack Germone, who are national political analysts, talk about the Washington scene. And the thing that now one normally represents the conservative side and the other more liberal side, but they were in agreement in terms of what's happening in Washington, D.C. with respect to the government. And both of them said over and over that the message coming out of Washington is to de-emphasize what is going to the role of the federal government. Now what that really means is there's simply going to be less money coming out of Washington. Now from my perspective, in terms of what's going to happen on the local scene, the impact could be tremendous. Let me explain why. We know that there is a tax revolt going on in all the local communities. People don't like to pay a property tax. We've experienced that here at NIC. Even though our tax is small, people still would like for it to be smaller. We're finding that the federal government is cutting back on many different aspects of higher education, one of which is even how people get financial aid. If those two sources dry up, then the state is forced with the responsibility of having to finance higher ed. We know the situation financially in most of the states. They simply can't afford to do it, and I don't see them going to tax us a lot more to get that money. So what I think is happening, it's a very difficult trend to discuss, but that the pressure is going to be put on the student to absorb more and more of the cost for his or her educational program. Extend the trend right now 10 years or even 5 years, and I think you might find a very different kind of opportunity for the average student to attend college. It's one of those things that needs to get a great deal of attention.
There's a side issue to what you just discussed. The Board of Trustees at North Idaho College, and I, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the board at CSI also is together, they're jointly addressing this question, that for our viewers who don't know, particularly out of state, is that North Idaho College and CSI both have several sources of funding, some from the state legislature, some from property tax, tuition fees, and other sources. Could you share with us the proposed plan that has come out of all of your talks about that you're proposing to keep property tax, but with some lessening of that Just explain to our viewers
Sure,
that concept.
Let me go back to this NCHEMS report before I do, however. When they were talking about the community college concept in terms of all the other institutions, one of the things they pointed out was that this community college responsibility in the other schools was getting less attention than it should. And the reason they felt that it was is because there was no local tax and there was no local board. Now, I maintain that if you're going to have a local board that has any authority, there's got to be some dollars to which they have a responsibility for. So the NCHEMS report was saying don't lose hold of that local tax or that local board, because that's what makes a community college viable. Now, the plan that you were asking me about is an attempt to take some of the local property tax and shift it to the state and go from a property tax to a sales tax. We're going to be having a meeting with our local legislators to discuss that concept. You're part of that legislative committee. I'm hoping that we can come up with something that will provide us to give a little reduced taxing situation to the local taxpayer, but I don't want to lose it completely because of this NCHEMS report. If we do, I think the kind of thrust that community colleges have received from local boards would be lost. So it's one of those special political games we play. We'd like to have some relief, but we feel the local people still have some responsibility for taxing or for supporting the local college. So I don't know how that's going to work through, but I am interested in pursuing it with the legislators from the northern part of Idaho.
I should add a footnote before we go to the panel. We're taping this program in October, but it'll air later, and so those meetings will have taken place.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. In
Chanel,
fact, we're going to have a meeting in, I think, in about a week with our local legislators.
It seems to me, President Bennett, that one of the things that's happening is we have an increasingly shrinking world as far as education is concerned. And I know that recently we've had visitors here at North Idaho College from our sister schools in other parts of the world. How do those things work together, and can you share a little bit with our viewers about how special it is to have a sister school?
It is very special. We have 4 now. We have 2 sister colleges in Japan, 1 in Korea, and 1 in Canada. And the people from Korea were here just last week. The purpose for it initially was to allow people from those countries to come over here and spend 3 to 4 weeks learning something about our culture and also learning how to speak the English language better. That's the primary motivation. But the interesting thing that's happened is that the administrators and now the teachers, particularly from the Oriental countries, want to come over here. And I think this is what's fascinating. They are totally convinced that the methodology used by the American teachers is better. And they are constantly questioning, can we take our professors, can we bring them over, can we let them set in on your classrooms and learn how to teach? And I think that's the best compliment that could be paid to American educators. So often we hear, oh, they have a better system. They don't have a better system. They probably have a good system, they have a very different kind of system, but the exciting things that happen in the classroom, the professionalism that goes with teaching, is seen to be better in America than other places. And so that kind of discussion keeps coming up all of the time. Can we bring our people over? Can we put them in your classrooms? Can we talk about pedagogy? And they are just picking our brains all the time. Now, in fairness, we're sending some of our people over there. We've had the president of our student body in the past go over and spend a year there. We've had several teachers from nursing education go over. They now want a teacher to go to Korea and spend a semester. And it's the kind of thing that's rather lucrative for the person who goes over. So I'm excited about this cultural exchange, and each time they've come, it's really been a wonderful experience.
Can I just interject before we go on that a couple of been talking about dollars and all those costs, that when they come here, they are paying for the students and so forth. I was at a board meeting, and I know you had a budget report where actually it's bringing dollars in.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, this sounds crass on my part, but when we started this whole thing, I said we will not do this unless we can be assured that we do not have to put any tax dollars into this program. In fact, we will make money on this arrangement, and that's been the situation for us. This is all run through the workforce training program, and they have to pay for all of their classes. No tax dollars are used to support that.
Steve Sheen.
I'm glad, Dr. Bennett, that Tony interjected that thought, because I was going to if he hadn't. But since he's already taken care of the question of what the financial arrangements are, maybe we should talk a little bit about the benefits our own students, North Idaho students, receive from having foreign students on this campus.
This goes far beyond the sister college thing. We've had a long tradition of having foreign students on this campus, and I think the philosophy was in support of that long before I ever came, and I think it's extremely healthy. The foreign students that come over here and actually take credit classes intermingle with our students. They're part of a lot of our intramural and our intercollegiate programs, as well as our arts programs. And I think they lend a tremendous amount to the culture of the campus with respect to that experience that the student gets when he comes on campus. We're right back to the first question. There's much more to it than just what happens in the classroom. That's one of the parts that would be missed if we do everything technically off campus.
And now that we've talked about money again, now that we've talked about the benefits of the foreign students again, I'm going to turn back to money, although it does seem like we spend too much time talking about it. A related point, we've talked a lot today about the changes that are going on in higher education. In your view, how much are they being driven by the need to get the cost of higher education under control? And it has been rising at a rate, at least in general, rising at a rate faster than the rate of general inflation. How much of it is cost-driven, and how much of it is customer-driven or student-driven, where our students simply don't have the time or the resources to sit in a traditional classroom but need higher education?
Well, I'm not sure I've got the question you're asking maybe in the right perspective. I would suggest that the off-campus education that's going to be delivered through television or some other means is probably well needed, and probably the money should be spent for that, simply because in a state like Idaho, my gosh, we are so big and have so far to go to reach these educational centers that it's probably money well spent. But the other side of it, in terms of why education is increased, comes right back to consumer-driven. We've recognized for a long time that there need to be people educated that are beyond 17 and 18 when they get ready to go to school. In fact, I think the great secret in terms of turning the economy of this country around will be the fact that our older people are coming back and getting re-educated. Now, they have to have special kinds of services in order to get back in the groove, so to speak. So we've put a lot of money in remedial education, and that's probably important. When I say we, we're talking about the state, the national, and the local government. But we're philosophically tuned into the idea that all people need to be educated, and from now on, probably the rest of their life. That does cost more money than it used to cost. We're also driven to the idea that we have to have computers in all of our classrooms instead of a blackboard. So even though it looks like we have spent a great deal more than, say, the cost of living, we have, but we've recognized that education is changing, and we must change and provide those services if, in fact, our economy is going to remain strong and our people are going to be served well. It's the best investment we can make.
Dr. Bennett, something else I know that's close to your heart, and this institution and many others have a great variety of services they provide. Obviously, our viewers are much more aware of the academic program and the transfer program in fields like medicine or dental or pre-law or whatever. We also have technology, and where people take 1 or 2 years and become mechanics and so forth. But there's a third component, or at least we place it aside, is the workforce. Would you take us a little bit through that? And it's a huge number of people that are being served by that, and how we work with the business world in making that available.
This is probably the most exciting new piece to the community college story that I could ever talk about, because we've recognized if we truly are a community college, we must work in a very close fashion with the business and the industrial leaders of the communities we serve. And we also recognize that even though people may have a 2-year or 4-year degree, what they're doing may be outdated and they have to shift gears. So as a result, we've put together what we call non-credit programs that can be offered in very non-traditional ways at a new center that was funded in part by our college foundation. And we have just literally boomed. In other words, what we started with a few years ago with hundreds in the program, we now have thousands. In fact, this year I was just given a report that we are 20% increased over what we were last year. We simply are meeting a need that's always been out there, and in a very non-traditional way. And I'm very excited about what we're doing in the new center in Post Falls has captured the imagination of a lot of people in this area.
Give us a couple of statistics. I believe I'm correct that there's thousands of people that go through that program in a year. And give us a couple examples of the program.
Well, the thing that started it probably was the Harper's Training Program. And what we've done now is begun to work with Jobs Plus, which is a local organization, you know, to promote industry. And they now are working with local industries. They will contract with us to do special kinds of training. In fact, they may even come to us and say, we would we have the curriculum all lined out. We will even want some instructors that we think are very good to be part of it, but they want the legitimation, if there is such a word, given to the program by the college. So what we do is sit down with business and industry, say, what is it that you want? And then we will try to create a program that will train those employees for a specific task. We worked with the people in Coldwater Creek out of Sandpoint. I just got a call. I can't give the details of it, but there's a potential of a huge new training program coming into the Coeur d'Alene area that we will probably be a part of. And it helps attract those businesses to our area if they know they have an institution that will do the training.
For our viewers who are off in Canada and other states, Harper's would be like a furniture factory.
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned
we
that.
worked with other colleges in Spokane, and they had to have that pool of expertise before they would come. Is that correct?
And that's very interesting that you would mention that. The Harper's Training Project was so large that we couldn't do it by ourselves. We didn't have the new training center at that time. So we cooperated with the Spokane community colleges, and the two of us put this training program together. It benefited both communities because people who work at the Harper's plant live in both Spokane and in Coeur d'Alene and the Kootenai County. So it's that kind of cooperation.
State lines did not stop that.
Didn't stop us a bit.
One other question, and then I'll go back to the panel. In addition to academic programs and technology and workforce and all that that trains people for in a short or long time for careers and contributing to society, you've also been very supportive of other benefits that are both for the community and on-campus people, and that has to do with the arts and humanities and the lecture series. And I'd like you to take a minute to tell us some of those, your philosophy about how that fits into the overall Renaissance person.
Well, I'll tell you, I go right back to your question, and that is, what is the college experience? And I have been convinced for a long time that as important as the classroom is, there are many other pieces to that college experience which gives a student a feeling about his or her life that's different than what he had when they started. One of the things that I like most are the things that happen in the arts and in the athletic field. So people are taken beyond themselves. And for example, we started an orchestra guild this year, which is becoming, I think, very successful. I'm very proud of our music program here. But one of the most exciting programs, and I'm going to have to give this compliment back to Tony because he's the one that's responsible for it originally, is the Popcorn Forum. And I am convinced that people have to go beyond the classroom, be in a much larger group, and see something that one instructor cannot bring to the classroom by himself or herself. And this year's Popcorn Forum is got to be one of the most exciting things we are doing. In fact, if I can just mention it, you may want to elaborate, the great people that this civilization, the world civilization, has put forth, the great minds are going to be brought to the campus of NIC. We have people, as you know, who go around the country impersonating, if you will, Thomas Jefferson, different historical figures. So you people came up with the idea, let's bring them to this campus and let them interact with our students so that they can talk to Thomas Jefferson or Aristotle or Sacagawea, as I understand it, Thomas Edison. I don't know how many you're going to bring, but it should be one of the most exciting programs that we've ever had at NIC, and I can't wait.
I have to interject, not only are they coming, some of them are Rhodes Scholars and so forth, but you have intervened and worked with the schools. And we work closely with the public schools, and they're going to bus students in for this, along with their own students in the community, so we are excited.
Yeah.
Janelle Burke.
One of the things that's happening as you go around and you're learning more about what's going to be occurring on college campuses in the future are plans for North Idaho College and what's going to happen here. And it seems to me that the community college is in a unique position to reflect or to make immediate changes, whereas four-year institutions, it's quite often more difficult because they have a longer process that they have to go through. But you can respond more quickly to the demands of the workplace or the demands of society in general. So what's going to be happening? What are we going to look like in the future?
Well, you know, you mentioned that we are quicker to react, and I think that's been one of our strengths. But as I look into the future, I think there will not be any strong lines drawn between K-12s and colleges, nor do I think there'll be a lot more blending there in terms of people being able to get college credit as they're still in high school. I think the relationship between the community colleges and the senior institutions will get stronger and stronger, and I hope they do, because I'd like to see more classes offered here by the University of Idaho and Lewis Clark, Boise State. The more classes in terms of the upper division that we can bring to this campus so that it's a total educational institution, the better. So I think the collaboration, if I would look into the future, I would say that the lines, that the artificial lines that have been drawn between the different schools will be lessened. And I hear the State Board talking about this seamless movement of students through education. I think we'll get to know each other better. Tony, for example, has been teaching a class for Lewis Clark. You're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. And these artificial boundaries shouldn't have ever existed. And I think there's simply not going to be room for them in the future. So there's going to be that blend, and the consumer, the student, will win.
And what are the strategic plans for North Idaho College?
Well, the strategic plan we are working through now, the last part of this in terms of at least completing one piece of it and then going ahead and redoing it again. And I'm meeting, I think, in about a week with all the people who are part of the Strategic Planning Committee. There are several things we're looking at. What are our needs going to be with respect to facilities? But the most important thing that I think may come out of the strategic plan is this program review process. Because I think we have got to look very, very hard at what we're doing to ensure that we are meeting the students' needs, and then to look in some new directions that we haven't looked at before, to possibly look at how we're going to deal with this question of technology on our campuses. Most teachers believe it and want to do it, but in fact they're going to have staff development so they can do it well. That's going to be part of the strategic plan. How do we train our people so they can use this technology and be at ease with it, and then our students will benefit? There's an awful lot to it, and it will be ever-changing, but I think we're now committed to planning strategically and for the future.
I get the signal we're running out of time, but I would just say in closing that involves personnel, it involves money, it involves structure, money. And so all those things are challenging. On behalf of our panel and our staff, Dr. Robert Bennett, the President of North Idaho College, we thank you for your time. We have really covered a lot on this program today, and it's been very informative, and I know it will create a lot of interest from our viewers, and we thank you, and we'll invite you back in the future.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. C. Robert Bennett, the President of North Idaho College, discussing many aspects of higher education, and I know you have found this program most informative, and I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we will move to yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.